So we're here with John Hall, co-founder and president of Influence & Co. Firstly, thank you for speaking. Greatly appreciate it. You gave us some wonderful accolades through your writing at Forbes. Really love to learn more about Influence & Co. because I think it's a unique business that perhaps didn't exist 5 years ago.
No, it
type
didn't.
of a thing.
No.
Yeah. So
Thank you for having me. I speak a lot and go to a variety of conferences, and honestly, my first take, I've only been here for a couple hours, but very engaged audience. We just talked about the difference between someone who has 200,000 Twitter followers and 2,000, and you can get more value out of the 2,000 engaged following rather than 200,000 followers.
The right followers.
Exactly. And so what I wanted to talk about in this speech is that how do you build it in a natural way? How do you get the right content in front of an audience where it's actually it's educational, it's valuable to them.
Sure.
It's not always promoting. I think one of the examples I used was getting content to them in a way where they're jabs and it's not the right hook. And what I mean by that is that a lot of times people just go in throwing the right hook where you're selling things all the time. And I think Gary Vee wrote a book about this. The same thing goes with content. When you're consistently getting them valuable content, you can go in for that right hook, and you can actually provide a lot of valuable stuff to the audience. So when you do want to sell them, you've influenced them. You've broken down the trust barriers.
Sure.
And it's difficult to get in place where you're consistently creating content that will do that. But that's what I was trying to come across and get to the audience today.
How do you get a little traction, or how do you recommend to your clients at Influence & Co. to really gain that traction initially? Is it just eyes wide open, ears wide open, and listen, or how does that work?
Well, we're dealing with mostly people who are director level and above.
Sure.
So you have egos to play with, you have barriers. I started getting content out there just addressing the barriers and the ego things and all these problems.
Sure.
Just because it happened so much.
Yeah.
And so what we try to do is we look at the client and say, okay, one, let's start with actually the strategy and the goals, what we are trying to achieve. And a lot of times you can hit them and get them kind of passionate about something when you ask them, so what are you passionate about as a company?
Right.
What truly do you want to get out there coming from you that is valuable to your audience, but at the same time is important to you? So, for example, we had a CEO we were dealing with that said I didn't have time to read or to write. Inc. wanted him as a columnist. Mm-hmm. And when I was talking to him, he wasn't creating content consistently. So what we did is we said, okay, how do we actually, he was in the education space, and great guy, really smart, but we said, how do we get him inspired to do this stuff?
Sure.
And there's two ways that we kind of went at it. One, we got him to start writing about, or start getting content and extracting that expertise where it was about stuff he truly loved, and it wasn't necessarily his subject matter expertise, which is interesting.
That's really interesting. So, all right. So tell me more about that.
So it's a crazy thing, because then you get them excited, and then you can start weaving in the subject matter stuff because it kind of blends in really well. And so that's what once you get them started and you get that process going, you got to be cautious of their time too. So what we try to do is take away all the time. I mean, it takes a lot of time to create content.
Sure.
So what we'll do is we'll create a process where you're actually creating the framework for articles and sending it to them, and you're giving them spaces to have their personal experiences, their expertise in it, where they think trends are going. So they're just stream of consciousness writing. Most CEOs or executives or directors can speak about it really well, but they don't want to sit down and write a 4-hour article.
Sure.
So what we try to do is create that framework that you, one, get them excited about it, but then two, you create a process that's so systematic that it's just including them for the part that they should love to do.
Very cool. Very cool. So, I mean, that process must be pretty laborious on your end.
I mean, we're really systematic. That's the thing, is that when you're in this area, you have to be, because part of influencing and actually, the thought leadership is consistency.
Sure.
So it's not just one thing that shows up. You have to hit it consistently over time. It's a commitment. It's not a campaign. It's completely different than an ad campaign you do.
It's a commitment, not a campaign.
Right. And this is exactly what happened 4 weeks ago. We just said that to someone, so I wrote an article about it. So if you look at my Forbes column 4 weeks ago, it will say it's actually that exact content, and it says why it is.
Sure.
And it's an article that did really well. And because you really have to think that way. The truth is that if you think you're going to go in and get a few articles, and this is commonly people get frustrated where the world didn't happen, or the magic didn't happen because I got one post or 2 posts or 3 posts.
Sure.
It's how everything works over time. And a good example is people throw up blogs, and they say, well, I'm not getting any traffic. I'm not, getting the results that I want. Well, no shit, you're not getting the results that you want. Are you kidding me? You just threw up a blog and you thought magic was going to happen.
Yeah.
If you create a strategy where you're doing the thought leadership content, tapping into new channels, and then they're drawing back and you're nurturing them with a blog, with white papers,
Sure.
then it's this beautiful kind of system that is like, wow, we're getting content consistently out there. There's people naturally coming to us. When they come to us, we're nurturing them, we're educating them. Then when we want to sell them, or we're just staying on top of their mind so that when they're thinking about, well, we need this, we go to Chris, we go to
Sure.
Silverback, we go to
Sure.
Influence & Co. And that's it's a huge thing when it comes to content marketing, is that you're staying on top of their mind so that when they're ready to make that decision, ready to buy, they think of you,
Right.
or when somebody else is ready to make that decision.
I feel like the executives that you work with get that right out of the gates, or is there a level of education? Is that a quick conversation? Or
There's a huge education. I mean, like right now, people don't naturally think that they need our service. It's just we know right now we're looked at as a vitamin. For example, what a painkiller would be is a mortgage loan. When you actually need to buy a house, you need to get a mortgage,
Sure.
right? So that is a pain killer,
Yeah.
obviously, when you do that.
Yeah.
So what we try to do is, like for us, this is a good example, is that we educate and create that painkiller for them.
Sure.
So the article example that I gave is that I did 4 common pain points to content marketing and specifically used client examples that had been mentioned to us when we were talking to them. We said, so what got you to naturally want to come to us that you needed us? They said, well, this is what happened in the office. This is what our CEO said. So we took that,
Right.
put it in content, educated people. It wasn't like, hey, this is why you should hire Influence Co. It was basically saying, how can we actually use these clients who had that pain, who came to us, to educate people that they might have the same pain, and then now as they see that, they naturally come to us, and then it's not a budgeting issue. It's
Sure.
not a situation where I might or might not need it.
Mm-hmm.
It's I need this. It's super valuable. This is a no-brainer for me, and that's the clients that we want. Is that we want people to be engaged, that they will put the effort to actually be a good client, rather than saying, oh, this might help.
I kind of joked, but it's reality that your business, or even the thought process behind your business, it didn't exist a couple of years ago. I mean, this is a new beast right
Mhm.
now. It seems like, what was the genesis of Influence & Co? Was this, where did this come from?
I mean, it's kind of when Kelsey, my co-founder, just amazing, smart woman. She actually was kind of involved at the beginning, even before I started thinking about it. But it was a pain point for me as an entrepreneur,
Okay.
and it was a pain point for one of our investors, Brent. He actually was mentioning like, hey, I got published here in Young Entrepreneur. It'd be great if I got published elsewhere.
Yeah.
And at the beginning, we were like thinking of it as, wow, it's something where, like, me as a young entrepreneur, I was having barriers because people were like, who's this young kid?
Yeah.
And I was like, how can I share with my expertise? How can I gain this credibility where they want to do business? They naturally trust me.
Mhm.
So we started doing it. Brent and I were the first clients, and Kelsey was running the show. And it was ridiculously great because as I started doing it, I started breaking down
So
trust
cool.
barriers.
Yeah.
And then we started using. We found out. I mean, it was perfect just because all this just natural stuff came out with content marketing, how valuable it was, and now it's. We still work with entrepreneurs and small businesses, but now big brands are coming to us and saying, we need this. We need to gain trust.
Sure.
We're working with some really large brands now that it's amazing to see that entrepreneurs need it, small business leaders need it, at the same time as that you have brands that need it. It's as obvious as. When you need to communicate to an audience and naturally gain trust, you should be getting them good information that positions you as that authority. And so that's pretty much where we stick our kind of flag for business, and it's worked out really well.
The way the world works now,
Yeah.
man. Well, listen, I greatly appreciate your being here. I think Influence & Co. is absolutely fascinating, and I think you might have just gotten a new client right now.
Working on it.
It's very cool stuff. Thanks, John.
All right.
Really appreciate it.